from the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg. This is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
To our audience here at home and around the world, you are now Inside Government. It's great to have you back into the program. As you know, we have been doing this series on fostering resilient crisis management, and this is the final episode, and we're going to be talking to Senior Project Manager for Fostering Resilient Crisis Management, or FRCM for short, Senior Project Manager, Mr. Elger Vermeer of VNG International. Elger, it's great to have you once again in the program.
It's great to be here, Cedric.
For those that have not gotten a chance to get to know you, giving you the opportunity once again to introduce yourself to our listening and viewing audience, tell us a little bit about yourself, Elger.
My name is Elger Vermeer, as you mentioned. I'm a Senior Project Manager at VNG International. And as VNG, we support governments, predominantly local governments, municipalities, but also central governments, all around the world in their tasks and responsibilities. So we implement projects supporting governments in their public service delivery, in involving citizens in decision-making, but also in their internal organization. So the way they run government, their budgeting processes, human resources, etc. And as a project manager, you are responsible for basically everything that's going on in your project. And personally, I've been working in a variety of countries, predominantly in the Middle East. So I've been working in countries such as Iraq, Jordan, Palestine, Egypt, but I've also worked a lot in the Caribbean region, especially on St. Maarten. Actually, also lived a year on St. Maarten on the island. So it's a very diverse organization that I'm working for with a variety of
Absolutely, and the thing is, I have to notice, you're a pretty young guy. And you have...
Well, you don't see the gray hair predominantly.
Where did your education path take you?
I have a master's in international relations and one in international development studies. Although I studied in the Netherlands itself, but my studies have always been very internationally focused.
I always like to highlight professionals in this program, giving, of course, our young people, especially those that are graduating from high school, some insight into what is out there and what's possible when it comes to the next step in their education and what they're capable of doing. And your task and, of course, your role in VNG International is quite dynamic. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Let's jump in now quickly into wrapping up the conversation about the FRCM, Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project. For those that might just be starting or getting into the series and have not followed us from the beginning, let's recap, Elger, if you may. Can you provide an overview of the Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project and its objectives?
Most definitely. The Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project is based on a partnership that we've had with the government of St. Maarten ever since Hurricane Irma in 2017. And in our project, we're working together with government to support actually its role in crisis response and preparedness. And we do that with a bunch of experts that we have from the Netherlands, but also, of course, with our counterparts on island working in, but also outside of government. And we're supporting the government in the way that it's managing information streams and data when a crisis hits, a hurricane, for example. We're building the internal, but also external capacities of government when it comes to crisis response and preparedness. We've been working on coordinating with different partners in the region, but also within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. When a hurricane hits, for example, how do you coordinate all the regional and international assistance that the island is receiving? And we're thinking together with the government on improving the crisis response structure. So that means what ministry is doing what ESF emergency support function, what group is doing what decisions can be taken by one ESF group, and what needs to be escalated to the EOC for more strategic decision making. So it's a very comprehensive program. Formally, it indeed started in 2022, and it's completing this year, unfortunately. but it is based on a way longer partnership that we've been having with the government, and a very solid partnership,
Yeah,
if I must
it's
say as
sad.
well.
All good things must come to an end. But the residual effects of such quality training that we were able to establish with your organization is priceless, and I'm sure it's going to go a long way. Let me ask you this: what motivated the initiation of this project, and what were the key challenges identified at the outset?
Well, the motivation actually starts with this partnership that I mentioned that we've had with government since 2017. Irma, of course, had a devastating impact on the island, and that's the moment when we started discussing with government: can we support you not only in the immediate aftermath of the hurricane, but maybe more importantly on a more structural, institutional side. So, can we support you on the longer term effects in how do you tackle such a disastrous situation? How do you prepare for such a hurricane? And how do you, as a government, organize yourself before, during, and after a crisis? So that's where our partnership initially was always focused on the crisis response and preparedness side. And our previous project came to an end in 2021. And we already had discussions towards the previous project with government. How do we proceed? What are your challenges still when facing a crisis situation, whether that is a hurricane or something else? And what we jointly decided on was that it's very important to tackle some of the structural elements and focus predominantly on government being sufficiently prepared on the long run to face a variety of crisis situations. And that's why this project focuses predominantly on tackling those structural issues. So the sharing of information within government, but also between government and the general population, the human resources, the capacities, the knowledge that government staff in crisis management have, and the regional exchange and calls for assistance whenever a large hurricane or another crisis hit the island. So basically, the project started with the challenges that government is still facing or was still facing. And of course, no one wants to rely on external assistance or external resources. So our ambition was always to make the government or the island, the community at large, self-reliant, self-sustaining in its capacities to confront whatever crisis situation the island can find itself in.
How was your role, or how has your role evolved since the inception of the project, and what key responsibilities have you undertaken?
I'm a project manager by profession. So that means that you're always in the center of the storm, so to say. You're trying to connect the dots between what are the wishes of the government, the needs on the island, and what can we as an organization offer? What does the financing agency of our project prefer? What do they want to see achieved in this project? So I'm the one trying to connect all those different realities and interests, so to say. And I feel that I'm often a matchmaker between this is what is needed and preferred on the island. This is what we as an organization can offer. And can we see where we have a match? I think you also asked me what did my role, how did it evolve? I think when I started as a project manager for Sint Maarten, I hardly knew the islands. I was also not an expert in crisis management, I'll be the first to acknowledge. But I think over time, by interacting with so many colleagues on island, interacting with so many civil servants in crisis response, you also become more or less a bit of an expert yourself. I've had different positions in hurricane exercises, for example, not only being the one to co-organize together with government, but also to be an observer and see what colleagues on the island, how they respond and what we have as recommendations. So I think from being a very humble project manager, so to say, I've also moved on to having more of an advisory role and being more involved in the content and the technical side of things when it comes to crisis
Elger,
response.
you touched on the four core parts of the FRCM project in your earlier statement, talking about information management, knowledge and training, regional coordination, operations and procedures, which all falls a part of the upscaling of the structure. I want you to break that down for us now and elaborate on those strategic parts of FRCM that is employed in fostering resilient crisis management within St. Martin. How do you break down those four core parts?
Well,
Exactly.
let's tackle them one by one, I would say.
So that everyone can get on board.
Start
Exactly.
with information management. Yeah, exactly. Information management is really geared towards instant sharing of data and information. Of course, in a crisis situation, information is always imperfect because we don't know what's happening. There's one crisis after the other. I mean, there are smaller crises during a large crisis, of course. But it is important that information is shared real time, as quick as possible, and that everybody is also aware of the fact that information is not complete. And you have to make decisions despite the fact that you don't have the complete picture and don't have the overview of the entire situation. So the information management component in the project is entirely geared towards how do you analyze a situation and how do you share whatever your recommendations or findings are with colleagues or other ministries, other people involved in tackling the situation. That's on the IM part of FRCM. The knowledge management and training component is fully focused on capacities. How do we ensure that people working in government, that those responsible and in charge of tackling a situation, that they know what they are doing and that their skills and experience is up to par. So this is completely focused on what we call developing and implementing a training and education strategy. So under this component, we have developed a variety of trainings, some basic entry level, what is crisis management, what are roles and responsibilities, but also some more difficult, more specialized tactical decision making, strategic decision making, etc. Operations and procedures.
We're going to get into the last two because I'm coming up on this first break. So, St. Martin, if you're just tuning in, I'm having a conversation with FRCM Senior Project Manager, Mr. Elger Vermeer of VNG International. Stay with us. We're talking about fostering resilient crisis management, what's happening within government, and how you can take advantage of these exact same skills within your organizational planning at home for the hurricane season or disaster situations that we might encounter on the island. Stay tuned. My conversation with Elger continues after the break.
During the hurricane season, patients with chronic long-term diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, and others who need to follow a specific diet are reminded to ensure that their hurricane kit includes 2 weeks of non-perishable foods that allow them to continue to follow their recommended diet. These patients should also have extra medication and medical supplies and continue to use them as prescribed by their house doctor or other treating physician during and after the hurricane. These items vary per patient, so patients should contact their doctor to find out what the most suitable foods for their conditions are. If you have a family member or a friend who takes prescribed medications or needs to follow a specific diet, call, text, or pass by them to make sure that they're prepared. This message has been brought to you by the St. Martin Medical Center and the Department of Communication.
Hi, everyone. If you're just tuning in, welcome. You're Inside Government. We're having the conversation with FRCM Senior Project Manager, Mr. Elger Vermeer of VNG International. We're talking about fostering resilient crisis management. This is the final episode within the series. Elger, we left off the first segment breaking down the strategy, elaborating and breaking down the strategies of the four core parts of FRCM. You touched on information management, knowledge and training. Now let's jump into that regional coordination. How does that work?
Regional coordination is a relatively new element in our project, and it focuses on the interaction that Sint Maarten has with other islands in the region, but also with the partners within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And it focuses on assistance, mutual assistance. So when Sint Maarten is enduring a crisis, how can and does it call upon its partners in the region or within the kingdom for support? But also, if another island is faced by a crisis situation, how can it ask Sint Maarten for assistance? And we all know a crisis is fuzzy. We often call it the fog of war, of course. So it has established a number of regular procedures that the island can use to call in assistance or to provide for support to other partners in the region and within the kingdom, and a mechanism to be used whenever you are in a crisis situation. So that's the regional coordination component under FRCM. The last component, the operations and procedures component, it sounds a bit dry, operations, procedures. The difficult word can mean anything, but what it actually boils down to is very important. It's the division of labor whenever you are in a crisis situation. So what are typical things that a ministry and ESF group can decide on itself, but what are also things that you need other groups for, other ministries, and whenever you need to scale up, you have to do it, but we're always in favor of keeping things lean and mean, and that's why we have been working on what we call an escalation structure or opschalingsstructuur in Dutch, to identify when can you take your decisions as a ministry or ESF group alone, and when do you need to escalate to EOC and really have that full-fledged crisis management structure in place.
What notable milestones would you say has the project achieved since its inception, and how have these milestones contributed to the overall success of the FRCM project?
That's a good question. I think we've achieved quite a lot. Of course, we have organized a lot of trainings, crisis simulations, of course, also the hurricane exercise, which is being organized on a yearly basis. But I think a notable milestone, for example, is that we have set up and trained a group of trainers on the island of Sint Maarten that can sustain the efforts when this project is over. I already mentioned no one likes to be reliant on external resources, and we also want to make our presence obsolete, basically. And by setting up this training group, and this consists of civil servants working for government, but also representatives of civil society organizations, the government, the island can sustain itself and ensure that when people enter, for example, in the crisis management structure or join government, that they can undertake a training organized by this group of people that have the knowledge, the skills, and also the competencies, not only from a technical perspective, but also as an educator. And I think that is a very important milestone under the project, which is focused on making us unnecessary in the end.
You know, Elger, one of the key things that we've been doing, and some may say, you know, we kind of overtrain when it comes to the hurricane aspect, but not taking into consideration the other aspects of disaster that can take place, whether it be man-made and other aspects of Mother Nature, earthquakes, tsunamis. How has the project adapted to unforeseen challenges or changes in circumstances throughout its duration?
It's a very interesting question. When I joined the Caribbean team here in VNG and took over the work that we have on Sint Maarten, all of our focus was on hurricanes, hurricane exercise, hurricane simulations, etc. And especially with the start of FRCM, and in our discussions with government, a lot of people told me we're a bit sick and tired of hurricanes. We know that we're experiencing them yearly and that we have to be prepared for hurricane season. It's vital, it's super important. But what if something else happens? And that's when we refocused on uncertainties, different scenarios. For example, we've had a scenario where we had a hijacking of a cruise ship, or a collision between a school bus and an oil tanker, a tank truck. So we also tried to inject uncertain scenarios, unknown scenarios on Sint Maarten, to test the procedures that are there, because most of those procedures have been organized or set up because of hurricane season and hurricane proneness of the region, of course. But we've played with other scenarios, other tests, also to see if those procedures and those procedures would actually work in practice for a different crisis situation. And luckily they did. And where they didn't, we adapted the procedures in order to make them fit.
What collaborative efforts have been essential to the project's progress, both internally and externally?
I think what is of a great value is our ongoing partnership with governments. We've been working with government for almost 8 years by now. And we've been working with all the different ministries. And I think that has been very important, because crisis management is not just for one ministry. Of course, someone has to be end responsible. You have to have a national disaster coordinator. You have to have one ministry designated with policy making. But in the end, a disaster affects the entire island, and thus government in its entirety. So I think that has been a very important factor for our success, is that we have been working with the entire government from one ministry to the other. And secondly, I think an important partnership has been our work and collaboration with actors outside of government. I already mentioned civil society organizations, NGOs, also individual experts, because it's good to have a perspective on a crisis that is not government focused or influenced by your work for government. And I think by taking this holistic approach, so to say, and cross-sectoral, I think we've been able to also look at a crisis situation from a community angle. And I think that has been an important factor in our success.
My favorite part is technology. So in what way has FRCM, the project, leveraged technology to enhance crisis management capabilities in St. Maarten?
I think there are two important elements in this question. And I think in our information management work, I already shared, it's all about data management, sharing of your picture of a situation, your reading of what's going on. And there we are using a tool which everybody has been using since the pandemic, MS Teams. Everybody knows it, whether we like it or not, but it's very user-friendly. Government is working with it. So we have introduced MS Teams as an information sharing tool during and prior to a crisis situation. So that's a very important aspect of where technology can actually help sharing real-time data and information between people at different locations. And secondly, we have set up a digital library, a knowledge center, as we call it, with all the materials, everything that we produced under the project, that is accessible for also government at large. So whenever a new colleague steps into government, becomes responsible for a particular task in crisis response, he or she can pull out whatever we have produced under the project, read it whenever it is suitable for them, or reread after a particular period of time if you want to revisit the information. So everything that we have produced under the project is digitally available for everyone working in government.
Can you discuss any lessons learned throughout the project's life cycle and how they have influenced the direction of FRCM?
I think the main lesson is flexibility and adaptability. As I mentioned, we always started with a hurricane focus, for example, on the project. But over time, we saw different crises popping up, different scenarios evolving, also governments challenging us in coming up with new ideas and new challenges. And you also see it in the whole narrative surrounding crisis management. The start is always disaster response. A hurricane approaches, what should we do? How can we protect people? But nowadays we have climate change. We see the importance of mainstreaming climate change in your policies. So your crisis focus shifts from being in an immediate disaster situation to longer term policy making and adapting to, for example, the whole discussion surrounding climate change and how that affects, for example, where you put up a school, where you set up your hospital, how you inform the general public. So I think this flexibility is a very important and core principle in such a project.
No, we don't have too much time left, and I want to give you the opportunity to highlight for us what's next now that the project has wrapped up. How does the organization now see itself post the FRCM project? Give us some insight there.
That is a good question. I think our partnership with the government of Sint Maarten will last. I mean, we've been working together for such a long time that there will always be fields for cooperation, areas where we'd like to stay in touch on. I think when it comes to crisis management, I'm really proud of what we have achieved, and especially what the government has achieved, how it has developed itself in a learning organization, able to keep up with up-to-date knowledge on crisis response, on training new colleagues, entering government and entering responsibilities in crisis management. So I think we can also take a step back there because government knows how to tackle a crisis and has all the information and knowledge and also the resources to keep that knowledge up to date. So in that sense, for crisis management, I think we have achieved a lot together. But for any other topic, we are also, for example, working on waste reforms. We're working on the cooperation between government and civil society organizations. Those remain topics where we are in constant contact with government and learning ourselves as well from how things are done and being organized on Sint Maarten.
Elger, if there's more information that viewers and listeners might want to access, where would you send one to get more information about the FRCM project?
I would definitely start with our company profile, vnginternational.com. That's where you can find information on our work on Sint Maarten, FRCM, or any other project that we are implementing around the globe.
FRCM Senior Project Manager, Mr. Elger Vermeer of VNG International. Elger, thank you so much for being a part of this series and, of course, a part of Inside Government.
Thank you, Cedric.
And to our radio listeners and television viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of our series on the FRCM, Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project. If you want to learn more about it and, of course, catch video on demand or audio on demand, be sure to log on to the official Facebook page of the Government of Sint Maarten at facebook.com/SXMGOV, or the YouTube channel of the Government of Sint Maarten. That's youtube.com/Government of Sint Maarten. And for audio playback, be sure to tune into Sint Maarten Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day. On behalf of my colleagues at VNG International, and of course here at the Government of Sint Maarten and the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in.